power to weight in this sort of racing, and understanding how this gamification works is going to be critical. And knowing these athletes and having spoken to them, they're doing this a lot in training. They're starting to understand what it takes to be competitive in this type of racing. It's a matter of getting that positioning right and going for it.
Yeah, that's right, because as you say, they don't feel the draft, but when you're in a pack, you can spend 30% less energy, or your watts can fall 30 or 40%. You can stay with that pack, and it's much harder to make a breakaway. It's also much harder to make a breakaway stick, and also to cross gaps is almost impossible, especially on the flat. So if you get left behind, and we saw that in the men's race, which we'll talk about in just a second, but if you get left behind on a climb, it's almost impossible, even with a team around you, to move back across. And I guess what we're going to see, and we saw the men struggle in some areas compared to how good they are in real life, because there's Zwifters who they only race on Zwift and they know everything about how it works and they know all the courses back to front. But the learning curve we're going to see over the coming dates, and I'll mention them in a second, we're going to see our athletes start to figure really up towards the pointy end, you would think.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing that triathletes are. They're very, very adaptable. And I think the athletes we have racing, both on the men's and women's side, are going to learn very, very fast. Alistair Brownlee on the men's side, we saw the other night, was strong, learning as he went. Having spoken to him since, he says he has a lot to learn and he's a fast learner. On the women's side, you know, I know that a lot of these athletes are using Zwift. I see them on their social media a lot, using it as a tool, communicating with their friends. So they're understanding how this power-ups go. Is it those? You've done this, Will, these power-ups, how you use them, when to use them, these closing of gaps. There's all these things that come into play that don't happen in the real world. Knowing when to use them, how to use them to win an event like this will be key.
Oh, absolutely. There are 5 different kinds. We'll throw over to AJ Borg over at Zwift HQ in a minute, and he'll give us his pre-show, if you like, to take you through the course map, the power-ups, the different teams that are competing as well, and who the big names are outside of Super League. We just want to give you a taste of Super League racing and who's going to be out there. So it is going to be Leonie Perriot and Cassandra Beaugrand. So the French connection there. Ilaria Zane, who came second in a TT warm-up of this exact course with Georgia Taylor-Brown third. She'll be there as well, Georgia. And who's our other one that it's escaping me right now? Taylor Spivey is our other very strong athlete too. She's going to be fantastic out there, and we're going to be checking in with her after the race as well. It's going to be fantastic. Now, for the Zwift Classics, before we go any further, they happen every 4 days at 7 p.m. British summertime. So, of course, that is in a few minutes.
What time is that in
4 days from now, 4 o'clock in the morning, mate, and that's why I look like this. You look exactly the same. You look like you do your best work at 4 o'clock in the morning. So every 4 days we'll have the men in 4 days' time taking on the course in Richmond, and then the Watopia, which is the made-up course, if you like, in Zwift, will feature the women in the Watopia Cup 4 days after that. And then Crit City, which is a new course to Zwift, will host the men as well. And our men's squad is fantastic. Well, let's talk about that, because the London International was 4 days ago. Was that Super League's debut, if you like. We had Alistair Brownlee, who, of course, is the reigning and 2-time Olympic champion. We have the world champion, Vincent Lewis. We had Ben Canute, one of your Bahrain endurance team members who's so good over so many distances. Hayden Wild and Martin Van Riel, renowned for their climbing and their bike handling skills, the pair of them. And let's just say there was a range of results, Macca.
Yeah, without question. And one of the interesting takeaways was when we spoke to Hayden Wild after the event, and he said he didn't warm up enough. He was shocked at just how quick the race roared out of the blocks. Having to be prepared for that first 4 or 5 minute onslaught was critical for him. You know, Alistair Brownlee was dominant very, very early, but was learning, as we said, as he went. And surprisingly, in that sprint, it was Martin Van Riel who just missed winning the event by a couple of seconds. I thought it was interesting viewing for someone who hasn't been into esports, who has never watched an event like this. I was quite eager to see how our top stars went and read their power and see what they were pushing out, because they're pushing out some massive numbers, but realising that it's pushing out those big numbers at the right times, I guess, like in a race that matters, and using those power-ups when they matter to win this event. And that was the gamification of cycling, the gamification of Zwift, and that's what lost these guys the races.
Yeah, Alistair Brownlee led for much of the early parts of the race and into the first climb of Box Hill. There was 2 climbs up Box Hill because they're on the London course. And he finished 34th. He averaged 382 watts across the course of that race, which is 40 minutes odd. Martin Van Riel, who lost out in the sprint, he was 2 seconds back. He finished 11th. He only averaged 353 watts. So he's averaging 30 watts less. which is and his average heart rate was 146, whereas Vince back in 58, his average heart rate was 179. So it's about, as you say, using your power at the correct times and understanding the concept and the game, because that's essentially what it is. And there are our 5 men who put their best efforts forward. You mentioned that that a lot of them were on social media afterwards talking about it. And this is what Hayden Wilde had to say. He looked buckled. He was buckled. He came 80th, and he gave it, as he always does, absolutely everything he had.
So yeah, finished my first Elites E race on Zwift. Everything I pretty much expected. Hide from the gun. Didn't have the legs today to stay with the lads. I think it was 130th, finished like 80th. It was just an absolute brutal 2 climbs up Box Hill. Boys were pushing. If you weren't pushing over 6 watts per kg, you were out the back, which I was. But hey, you learn a lot today about positioning and the era advantages, and not to panic in the group. Big up to the other lads, Martin, Alistair, and Vincent, all getting, I think, in the top 30, which was top 40 definitely, which is awesome for their first race, elite races. And then Ben Canute just finishing just in front of me. But yeah, hopefully I can do a bit better next time. Hopefully to freshen, I'll definitely be freshening the legs up a little bit pre-race. Yeah, I think the early morning as well. So I might get up a little bit earlier to let the body wake up and have a good strong coffee. But no, I really enjoyed it, and hope to get some more racing in. Yeah, as I said, we're not racing much, so this sort of stuff is awesome. It's pretty much racing it from home, and that's definitely one of the hardest things I've done.
That was the men's, and it's all in the past now. It was a learning curve for a lot of our men, but how good was Mallie Brown at the front? How good was Martin Van Riel? Now we turn our attention to the women. We have a very, very strong squad of 10 women who we'll be seeing across the course of the next few Zwift races, and 5 of them we're going to be seeing coming up in just a few minutes, taking on the Trofeo Bologna, which is the Giro d'Italia exact replica of the TT stakes that started the Giro. It's very, very exciting. Huge climb in it. And one of the victims who's going out there to test her mettle is Georgia Taylor-Brown, who's in her pain cave right now. I'm going to cross live to Georgia. Georgia, how, first of all, has isolation been for you? Obviously, you had a great result in Mooloolaba. We didn't know that was going to be the end of the season so far. And now you're back in the pain cave and ready to take this on. How's it been?
Isolation has not been too dissimilar to normal training, I guess. I'm not someone that goes out much anyway. I guess the only thing is that I can't swim at the minute. But I can still run. I can still go outside for now in the UK. And yeah, I'm in my cellar at home, just ticking away the miles on my bike, really. And I think Zwift just makes you really fit. But yeah, I'm doing all right at the minute, and I just thought I'd sign myself up to a bit of a challenge and get out there and race today.
How is your setup in there? I mean, we're going to see Taylor Spivey in just a second. How's your setup? What does it look like? And what have you learnt from maybe watching the men do it, and what needs to be done?
Well, I think it's quite technical, all this Zwift stuff. So I've got my laptop, my phone, I've got my bike computer, I've got a heart rate monitor, I've got a power meter on my bike, wireless headphones. You need a lot going on to be able to keep up with it all. But yeah, it's nothing exciting in this cellar right now. It's just a little table at the front with the laptop and everything set up, a bit of an emergency gel on the go, and then yeah, my bike, and not much else, just me suffering.
Have you had an opportunity to look at this course? I haven't had the opportunity to ever ride Zwift, but I did watch the men's race the other night, and I noticed that knowing the course had a lot of advantages. Alistair got caught out a little bit in the men's race. I know this course has a really, really big climb in it. Have you had the opportunity to roll over the course to ride it, or you don't get that opportunity?
Yeah, I have had an opportunity. I've been able to do an 8K time trial on it over the weekend, and yeah, that was actually really hard and a bit of a shock. So I'm glad I did that and got out and did the course to see what it's all about, because it is really hilly. And it's not just a gradual incline. I mean, these are some big hills that we're climbing up. So yeah, it's good to be able to know where I need to be getting out the saddle and everything. You still have to take all that into consideration, even on a kicker.
Now you're looking super relaxed. We've only got a matter of sort of 20 minutes or so until race starts. So you've already need to start warming up in just a second. So we'll let you go soon. But I was wondering whether you watched the men's race and you saw the watts per kilo they're putting out, or whether you've watched other women's races and seen the kind of power that they put out, and also the way they use the power-ups and the way they sort of get drafting in packs as well. It's very different to riding out on the road.
Yes, it is. I watched the men's race, and I'm not going to lie, it was a bit surreal watching, and it felt a bit weird watching this virtual race. But I really got into it. And the watts, they were putting out some big watts, especially towards the end when they were going up the hill and it was coming to a sprint. And when the watts just turned orange and it just goes up and up and up. So yeah, they were putting out some massive watts. And then I did try a bit of a workout on one of the classics routes of the women, of how to keep up with like Marianne Vos, Van der Broek, I think she's called. And I think I lasted about a minute 30 on that workout because it was horrific. So they're putting out some big watts, so it's interesting, but I'm up for the challenge. It'll keep me, it's something for me to focus on during this isolation.
And it's a lot more difficult because you can't really work as a team, right? We can't. The one difficult thing with this, even though we're going in as a Super League team, you can't find your teammates on the course. So it's very, very different than an on-road racing. So it's basically you're looking after yourself, just trying to stay aware of what's happening around you, and then being prepared for that, punching out that power in that last climb, putting out those big watts.
Yeah, I think it is hard to see where people are on the course, but I think what we just have to focus on is our own personal watts and how we're coping, and just manage it, because it's still a 23k course, so it's not going to be a flat out effort. We still have to pace ourselves, especially up the hills. But I think for me, it's more just sticking to kind of a consistent watts per kilo and making sure I'm keeping that within the range that I can manage.
All right, we'll give you a break to start warming up. We're going to go and see something else in just a second, but if you wouldn't mind just staying with us for a couple more minutes, Georgia, before you get down to business. You mentioned your cellar. It does look very much like you're in a cellar down there. Taylor Spivey is another one we're checking in on, and we will be checking in on during the race. And she obviously watched her partner Vince have a go and finish 58th in the men's race, and she's going to take us right now through what her pain cave looks like. And I know that everyone who rides on Zwift, their pain cave is all important. And this is what Taylor's looks like.
Hey, what's up? It's Taylor Spivey, and I'm getting ready for the Trofeo Bologna race tonight. I am absolutely terrified because I've ridden on Zwift about maybe 10 times and I've never done a race. And since the lockdown's been going on, I think I haven't done a bike workout in about a month. So this is definitely going to be a shock to the system. Riding against some really strong professional female cyclists, but I think it'll be good fun. I miss competition and kind of feels like I'm going to race this year, which is exciting. So I'll show you my setup. Here is my current setup. This is a bedroom turned into my pain cave where I have my trainer and my sad attempt at gym equipment. So I have the Flux 2 Tac X trainer by Garmin. This was a last minute impulse buy, pretty much the day before all shops shut down here in Portugal. I wasn't sure if we would be able to train outside, so I got this bad boy. And I'm happy I did, because I do about half of my rides on it now with on Zwift, and it kind of feels like I'm riding with people, because otherwise if I ride outside, I'm alone. So really happy to have this platform. As for everything else, I have a French bike, a La Pierre bike, that I will be riding on its first race ever. It's pretty exciting. And I will also have 2 water bottles, one with water, one with a Science and Sport electrolyte, and a gel in case I get hungry, because the race will begin at 7 p.m., which is dinner time for me. But I'll probably be going too hard to think about eating. I will also have my Garmin connected, and this is my setup. Some beds moved to the side. As for riding indoors, I'll also turn on this aircon because it will be very hot in here. Trying to keep up with the rest of the race.
How good was that? A look inside what Taylor is going to be seeing around her as she's staring at her screen, just as Georgia Taylor Brown's going to be staring at her screen in just a few minutes' time and hoping to stay with them. Georgia, I want to ask you about the start, because in a Zwift race is a little bit different. So in a road race, you can go out, you can find your feet a little bit, but they encourage you to be riding high watts, like zone 4 stuff, while you're in the pen, while you're waiting before you go, because the pace is just so quick and you can drop off really quick. And it's really hard once you're off the back of a group to ride back across, just the way that the game is set up. Is that something you're conscious of?
Yeah, definitely. I have tried, I think 1 or 2 races now, and I have noticed that it goes straight away, and you really do have to get your watts really high while you're almost held in that pen on a turbo. So you just have to make sure that your watts are really high so you can go straight away. And then I think it's around for the first 4 minutes, you really have to go quite deep and just everything you've got. And then it'll settle down a bit after that. But yeah, those first 4 minutes are going to absolutely kill.
Yeah, so when you do come out of that pen and you are settled in for that first 4 minutes and it does settle down, what's the feeling? Because it's unlike a road race, you don't feel that draft. So how do you... Are you paying more attention to what's happening on screen and where you're positioned? Or because usually you would feel that, but you're not actually feeling it, even though there is an advantage by being in the group. So how do you attack that? Is it a different approach?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, when you're actually out on the road and you're in a group, you're focusing on the wheels in front of you and the girls around you and everything else going on. Whereas when you're just here on your own in your pain cave, you are just looking at the screen, and there's a lot of different stats on the screen when you're on Zwift. So yeah, I'll just be mostly looking at like my watts per kilo, my watts, who's actually around me, the time gaps that people are around me, how many people we've got around. And then there's like the scale of the inclines coming off and the whole map of the course. So there's loads of stuff to kind of keep you focused, because otherwise, if you're just looking at the time ticking on, it really gets to your head. So yeah, I try and focus on all the other things but not look at the time at all.
Last question before we let you go. There are like professional Zwift teams out there, part of the community, and they race in all the races. And Team Hino is this team that dominated in the first race, of which we were not involved. They had 3 times as many points. It was a points race than anybody else. And they're all in contact via Discord all the time. So they have lead outs for Queen of the Mountain sections or intermediate sprint sections. Are you guys, the 5 of you, have you got any way to communicate? The other teams do it. This is a scratch race. This is a little bit different, but you do have a Queen of the Mountain section. So is there any communication going on between you guys during the race, or we haven't? Because we've just started, so we're still learning this esports thing, Super League.
Yeah. Yes, I think we are still learning at the minute. We have got the Discord app to try and communicate, but I'm not going to lie, I don't think I'll have much of an input during the race, because I don't think I'll be able to talk very much. It's going to be really hard. So yeah, maybe not during the race, but I'll have an idea of who's around me, and when we set off, I'll make sure I kind of know where the other girls are at and hopefully try and stick with them.
So we'll do an interview with you during the race, like when we need really long answers from you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Up the hill as well, the 2K climb. That's great time to do it.
Indeed, where your heart rate's at about 190. Look, go and warm up, get ready. We can't wait to see you out there. Best of luck in your first Zwift Classic.
Yes, and get those watts up in the pen. Go out hard. Good luck.
So George is getting ready to race. We're only a few minutes away now. We're going to go to Zwift HQ in just a second, and OJ Borg, who's going to give us the rundown on the course and everything else. Mac, before we do that, a prediction for our Super League athletes, the 2 French women, Ilaria and Taylor, and of course Georgia. How do you think they're going to go?
Look, making a prediction in esports is always tough. If we were standing on a Super League course, it'd be much easier. But you know, taking bike skills out of the equation now because you don't need to have the skills that, say, a Leonie Perrier has. I'm going to go with Georgia Taylor-Brown just off the back of her performance in Mooloolaba. She seemed to be finding form, following on social media. She seems to be training a lot. She's able to get out a little bit more than the French are at the moment in this isolation stage. She's running a bit. What she's done this morning before the race will be interesting. I think Georgia Taylor-Brown to be our highest-ranked Super League athlete. Can she win? We'll wait and see.
Well, I'm going to go with Ilaria Zane, which is something, and I'm basing that purely on the fact that she did so well in the TT that they just raced yesterday. She's pushing 4.5 watts a kilo up that hill, so she's obviously in supreme form. So look out for Ilaria Zane as well. It's time now to get to it. Thank you, Macca, for getting up so early. We'll stick around. We'll watch the race. We'll chip in if we need to, and I'll see you at the other end.
Will do.
All right, there we go. Here we go. It's the Zwift Classic. It's the Trofeo Bologna, the first time our Super League women have entered into the world of esports. We hand over now to Zwift HQ and OJ Book.
World and all these people who've never raced before, but giants in their own scene, all come together. There were fireworks. It was everything we hoped and more. Watch it back. You can find it on YouTube and on Facebook. I would absolutely recommend watching it all back. Today, though, we are in Bologna, or as I like to call it, Bologna, as the women return to duke it out on the Trofeo Bologna course. It is the same as the London race, the last one out, which means scratch race, first one over the line wins. There is, again, a QOM prize, intermediate QOM prize, points available at the finish line as well in the midst of the race. And it's going to be on the TT course, the Bologna TT course. It is not a TT. Now, always remember, you can watch these great pro races, these elite races, but you can race them as well. As soon as we're finished, a few hours later, you get a chance to get on. Once every hour in the community, there is a race. Find it via the Zwift app or the website. And after missing the first one, I took on the second one. May I just use the words, ow, on how I feel about racing it. But remember, you can take this on and it'll be available for just 4 days. Now, the elite women are warming up as we speak, or at least as I holler at the camera. But before we let them out of the starting gates, let's catch up with a giant of the women's Zwift scene. That is Louise Huback of Team Hino. We know what she's like, we know how good she is, and Danny Rowe caught up with her to find out what the secrets of all that success is.
Louise Huback, the Danish national champion, going away, coming over the top of Daniela Straight though, but it's going to be Huback. It looks like it was Huback though, maybe nipping it at the line.
I must say congratulations on a mighty team win in the last round of the Yorkshire race. How was it for you? It looked brutal.
Yes, it was brutal. It was a very hard race, and we knew it would be very hard.
Huback is in there as well for team the Hino racing team, as Huback goes to the front, gets herself in an aero tuck, a little bit of a deserved rest, I think.
What I love about the Zwift racing is the fact that you get into this Zwift game without, you kind of forget yourself. And then you really, you're able to perform harder than if you're just training on your home trainer all by yourself. And then I like the fact that I'm not afraid of getting pulled down in the peloton or any seriously crashes. So I can just focus on getting stronger and working harder and just having fun in this Zwift world.
And you and Cecilia seem to be so dominant. Is there any rivalry between the both of you? Obviously you're on the same team, but you seem to both be up there every single time.
I mean, I'm just as happy if I get the win, if Cecilia gets the win, or Vicky or Vicky Neelan. I prefer the team spirit, and as long as we get to perform well, then I'm happy about it.
Do you train together at all in the week? How do the team dynamics work?
Well, due to the time difference, it's kind of hard to train together during the week. So we don't train together, but if we have a race, we do some meetups. We do talk the routes through, and we make a tactical plan with La Suspelle. I mean, being 44, the warm-up is quite important to me.
So have you been smashing each other up hills in preparation for this next Bologna race? I think it's going to be even more brutal than Yorkshire was, to be honest.
I agree. I think it will be very hard on Monday. I'm sure that there are a lot of riders that we need to look out for.
Do you think you'll be riding as aggressively as you were in Yorkshire?
You never know.
Can't let that secret out yet.
You never know what will happen. Well, I think we will be working hard as we like to, and we like to split the peloton, but I think we will also be drafting and be playing smart because it's going to be hard. It's going to be brutal.
Thanks so much for joining me, and good luck for the race in Bologna.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Louise Hubat there talking to Danny Rowe, and it's interesting that we hear from Danny Rowe because last time that the Bologna course was out there in the Tour de Zwift, I raced it with Danny Rowe, and I ended up hanging onto her wheel up that climb. It almost broke me. Swear words were shouted at the walls here in my pain cave, to the point my 6-year-old heard and came out and absolutely scolded me for it. But yeah, it is a complete brute of a course, of which we're just minutes away from, he says, looking at his wrist without a watch on it. I promise you, we're just minutes away from this women's race. But before we get there, we've talked about the course. Let's take a look at it. Matt Stevens has the details.
We're in Bologna for this Zwift Classic. The climbers will certainly be pleased to take on the course, replicating the opening stage of the 2019 Giro d'Italia. The first kilometres are fast and slightly downhill, which will make it hard for any break to get some breathing room. The first climb up to San Luca will set the tone for the race, with the Queen of the Mountains competition at the top. The steep slopes will favour the strongest climbers, but with the descent coming just after the summit, it'll potentially allow groups the opportunity to chase back on. The long flat sections will give the riders some time to recover, but they won't have time to gaze upon the gelato stalls and the Bologna FC stadium, as their mind will surely be on the last climb of the day. With its slopes of around 18 to 20%, San Luca will prove a real test of strength for the riders hoping to get the Trofeo Bologna on their palmares.
Thank you very much, Matt Stevens. As always, I'm telling you, that hill, 18 to 20%, the slopes, it's brutal and it just never stops. You feel like you get in there and all you can hear is your breathing echoing around your walls. And once again, you can race these. You can race this course. Watch it in a few minutes' time, then race it yourself. All of these classics courses are available for you to race for 4 days. It's worth giving it a go, even if it does break you, as they do me. One thing you'll be able to use on these courses is the power-ups, like our pro women are about to be able to use as well. And in the context of a race, they're so important. They are so important. If you get one of the arrows, for instance, that is the sort of power-up towards the end, if it is a sprint finish, that can make the difference. On something as hilly as this, you need the lightweight. If you think you've got the ability to break the elastic, then maybe use the Ghost power-up, or just for a laugh, use the Burrito one. And with that, let's get stuck in today's main course, which is the race as well. The women are gearing up and the course is beckoning. So here's Matt, joined today by world and Olympic champion Danny Rowe, with a quick look at the teams and riders set to be a threat before we dive straight into the action.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the race format today is a pretty straightforward one. It's a scratch race. It's on the Bologna TT circuit. It is a very, very difficult course indeed. We have 2 ascents of the San Luca climb. We have a Queen of the Mountains on the first ascent, and then we finish at the top. So it's essentially 1.5 laps of this TT circuit that we saw feature in the opening time trial of last year's Giro d'Italia. It's the first time the women have raced on this. We saw the men race this as a Zwift Classic last year, and expect those featherweight power-ups to be exceptionally valuable. Total distance, 24.6 kilometres, a shade under 16 miles. Plenty of riders on the grid. ADHR on the top left. We've got Canyon SRAM. They're fielding a very, very strong team, and as you would expect, Canyon ZCC, a formidable squad. We've got Great Britain Cycling Team Draft as well. Team Hino up there. They, of course, won the Yorkshire team race last week. Velocity Vixen, Valcard Travel and Service with their Italian lineup. Lots of teams. Team ZC as well. It's going to be interesting to see how things mix up. Got a couple of guests from the road side of things today as well. We'll talk about that a little bit in a few moments' time as we look at some of the individual riders to watch. Ella Harris, a former Zwift Academy winner. She has really set the road world on fire, and I think this course is definitely going to suit her. Watch out for Cecilia Hansen for Team Hino, one of the most consistent riders out there. Also, a little outside tip, Megan Barker, very, very good road rider for the Great Britain cycling team. And then we have an exceptional triathlete riding for the Super League Tri team, and that is Georgia Taylor-Brown. And watch out for one of the best climbers in the world, Ashley Moolman, riding for Danny's team, Rowan King. And then a very explosive young New Zealander, Ione Johnson, a former finalist for the Zwift Academy, riding for Canyon ZCC, and a regular winner on this Zwift platform. As we look at Shayna Paulus, and the group are already moving away, but as we mentioned before, alongside me is 3 times world champion and Olympic champion. It is Danny Rowe. Danny, this is going to be a great race. It's a scratch race, nice and simple, but this course isn't simple at all, is it? It's very, very tough.
No, it's really not. And having ridden this course myself, I know how brutal it is. This is a flat start. At the beginning of this race, you can already see how hard these riders are working. Meg Barker, as you just mentioned, from the Great Britain team at the front here. But as soon as they hit this climb, I think it's going to just blow to pieces. And I think the first time up the climb, they're going to use it to suss each other out. I do think it will split, but I think the second time will be fireworks.
Indeed, we're just looking at Shayna Paulus there. Looking pretty steady at the moment, but still putting out just over 300 watts there, moving to the front for Show Air 2020. You know, a team that almost ride exclusively on the Zwift platform, a team that's been going for a few years now, a very loyal team. Now we're just heading on a slightly downhill section for a little while. We head downhill for about 2.5 kilometers. The road then starts to pitch up a little bit, just discernibly so. It's a long drag, and then we hit a real sharp right-hand corner, almost a hairpin bend, and then we hit the bottom of the climb, and then it really does rear up. But it's a very steep climb indeed, 2.1 kilometers, average 10%. But as we know full well, Danny, there are some really steep pitches up there, 19, 20% midway through before that flat finish. So it's a climb that's really hard to get into a real rhythm in, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's super steep, like you say, up to 20%. So I do think it's going to favour the light riders. I had a look at Zwift Power earlier, and there's quite a few riders that are less than 50 kilos, which I can't remember the last time I was under 50 kilos, probably when I was about 10 years old. So it's definitely going to favour those types of riders. I thought it was really interesting, though, to see how Rowan Dennis played out to Zwift yesterday in that Team Ineos race. He just rode his own race and ignored the others. I think because the climb was longer, that will probably be easier for him to do. But I do think today some of these riders will be going in with different tactics. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they ride this the first time up.
And it is more of an again. It's because the gradients are constantly changing on this particular climb. It is hard to get into a rhythm. It is going to suit the pure climbers, but I think because it's a slightly shorter effort, as we get our first view of Ashley Moolman Passio here, we'll talk about in a few moments' time. I think it's not just a climb for the pure climbers. It will suit the punchers as well if they can get themselves over first time and keep in the mix, especially as the finish flattens a little bit, because the last 400 meters aren't steep at all. It's actually pretty flat. It's just that a lot of damage has been done beforehand.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was actually looking at Strava earlier, and I think the fastest time up this climb is around 7 minutes. So like you said, it is relatively short compared to a climb like Out to Zwift. So like you say, if these heavier riders, the more punchier riders can get over the first time, they might then be able to recover. And depending on how the lighter riders ride this climb, they could hold on and be there for the finish.
Yeah, definitely, especially if they use the power-ups right as well. Remember, I think the most important power-up today, as you see Passio moving to the front. Actually, she's been quite active already in this race, making sure she's well positioned. As you look at Corinne Fox from the Wahoo team, just picture in picture, they're still but this is a flat section here. You look at the power that she's putting out. This isn't easy at all. It just shows the real standard of these races. There's no easy riding, although they do get the draft effect sat in the middle of this pack here, putting out 280, 300 watts. For riders that are quite light, that's going to be at or near threshold already.
Absolutely, and I think it does sort of, it's very similar to a crit style race where it would start fast and furious, and I think with that in mind it just means that the warm-up is critical. I know with our riders we make sure that they're all really well warmed up. We heard Louise talking before in the VT about how her warm-up is absolutely crucial for these types of races, because like you said, they're going out from the gun, they're doing 5-6 watts per kilo straight away even before this climb is starting. So yeah, there really is no recovery. You might see a little bit on the descent being super steep, but this is going to be brutal all the way to the finish.
It certainly is. We're just looking at the stats of Tanya Eraf. She was the first ever Zwift Academy winner, and as a real asset to the Canyon SRAM team. It's been such a successful scheme. You know, we had nothing like it at all in the world of cycling, and it's a brand new template, but it's going to cast the net very wide and maybe unearth talent that without Zwift we wouldn't actually know about. But Tanya Eraf, very an exceptional rider, riding well on the track at the moment, and going early there. Maybe when you look at the composition, think of the Canyon SRAM team, maybe Tanya was just trying to make sure this pace is high, because I think one of the favourites today has to be Ella Harris, the New Zealander. She's the current under-23 New Zealand road champion. She won her first big pro race earlier this year in the Women's Sun Tour. And if there's a course apart from the Outdoor Zwift that's built for Ella, it has to be something like this if she's feeling good.
Absolutely, and I'd love to see Ella do well today. Like you said, a Zwift Academy winner, and I actually think there's another Zwift Academy winner in the past that could do well today, and that's Lea Thorstein. I was looking at the start list earlier, and she's also a fantastic climber and one that is very used to racing on Zwift, knowing when to use these power-ups. So I think these riders could really stand out today. But the Zwift Canyon team, the Canyon SRAM team, have a super strong team with Tanya as well, and also Ami Lusic. She is also one that we know can time trial and climb. And as we just talked about Lea, you can see her
right
there,
on cue.
right on cue, exactly. So I'm really excited to see who's really in form, who's been training in this lockdown period. I think some riders will lose their head and kind of go back to basics with their training, really go back to the sort of base winter miles, and others will be really motivated by these races on Zwift and keep that high intensity within their training programs.
Well, we're just moving to the front. That is Ashley Moorman-Passio. Must be. I know you have to remain as a commentator impartial, but Danny, it must be pretty good to get one of the finest riders on the women's road circuit in racing in Zwift. We know that she's been doing quite a few miles on Zwift. She hasn't done too many races at all, but a course like this is going to suit her because she really is a specialist climber. She's a multiple South African time trial and road champion. She's in fact the current road and time trial champion of South Africa, but revels in hilly attritional sorts of races, and she moves clear early on.
She does, and I'm not sure if she's going to go in a bit too early here, but this is playing into her strength. She wants it hard from the start. She wants to get rid of as many riders as she can up that first climb. She's a fantastic climber. We all know that. She is one of the riders that is under 50 kilos. She's super light. She's riding for CCC Live, which is what Wilders was when I was riding for them in my last professional year of cycling. A fantastic team, but like you say, new to Zwift racing, but super motivated to do well in these races.
Well, she's moved straight to the front of the bottom part of this climb. We are on the climb now. We've rounded that hairpin at the bottom, and this is where the road kicks up. It's quite steep for about 400 or 500 meters. Then it flattens again. Then it twists and turns, and it goes through the archway and kicks up to the steepest part, which is about 3/4 of the way up this climb. But already, Ashley Moorman-Passio is making an impression on this race. Look at that, 300 watts she's holding. But when you bear in mind that she's very, very light, I mean, don't like to talk about riders' weight too much, but she's incredibly light. She's so efficient and flies up these climbs and is already splitting things. But look at the class that she's putting behind her. Bates, Whitelaw, Huback, all of the big names are starting to follow her on the lower slopes of this climb.
And I think these teams would have had Ashley in mind. They had to have had her as the out-and-out favourite going into this race, and it is really about trying to hang on to her wheel as long as possible. You can see Vicky Whitelaw up there, and she's been there every single time when she's been riding these Zwift races. We know she can climb. Louise Bates on her wheel as well, a real key Zwift rider, and Huback, who we did see at the start. So they know how to race, and they're just hanging on to Ash's wheel here. They're in the slipstream. They know that they don't have to go past her. They just need to conserve their energy here. This bunch is going to split up. We know it's a super fast descent, so if there are gaps, they might get back, they might not. So Ash is doing what she always does and what she's very predictable for, and that is going hard from the bottom to the top of a climb of this length and this steepness.
Well, she's going to want to whittle down this field as much as she can. She knows she needs to use this climb. She needs to ride a race that kind of suits her attributes, really. And basically, she needs to kind of tire these other riders out, whittle this field down, get rid of maybe some of the punchers, thin things out so we've got pure climbers left. But still, fair group together here. Whitelaw in second position there. Bates, just look at the stats of these riders, all pushing around 5 watts a kilogram. And just look at the damage here, Danny. That's this great camera shot as we move further and further up this climb, up to the top of the Madonna. We'll go past the Madonna di San Luca. It is an iconic climb, not just used in the Giro d'Italia, but used in many races over in Italy. But she's really, really putting the hammer down. There's some big gaps starting to open up.
There is, and it is just savage, it's just, you are pushing yourself so hard. It's almost such a mental game, this, when these gaps are going in front of you and you're given 100%, knowing that actually there's still such a long way to go this climb. You're right on the limit. You've got no power-ups. It really is about just giving your all, and Ash is just on there. She's taken control, as we said about Rowan doing yesterday. She knows the power that she can average for this length of climb, and she is just holding. It will be about her threshold of power, and we can see that she is the strongest out there today.
Yeah, she certainly is still on the front. There's 7.3 watts a kilo. She'll be putting a lot of torque through the bike because this is where the gradient kicks up. If you just look at the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the gradient there changing 15% now as we look at Lizzie Duncombe. Look at the face of Duncombe. Thankfully, she's got a breeze blowing to keep her cool, breathing really, really hard. And that is going to be a face, I think, that's going to be replicated through this field as Moolman pulls clear with Bates on a wheel. Bigger gaps opening up now as we hit one of the steepest parts on this nasty climb, 16% now. Remember riders weaving all over the road in the Giro d'Italia. I think a lot of riders were very surprised at how ferocious this climb is, but Moolman Pasio has not missed a beat so far. She knows what to do, and she's setting the tone, isn't she?
She really is, and she is having a gap. You can see this gap is going, and this is where you have to use your power on the steepness of these climbs. This is 16%. This is one of the steepest parts of this climb. So if she wants these gaps to go, she has to commit now and really put the work in. And a lot of these riders will be praying for that feather power up, which we know reduces your weight by 9.5 kilograms for 15 seconds.
What a start to this race we've had already, Macca. We've been watching avidly at the front of this race, and these guys are pushing 5 watts a kilo early, 300 watts overall. And Ashley Moolman-Pasio, who's at the front right now, she's pushing 300 watts, and she is 49 kilograms. So if you were pushing 5 watts a kilograms, you'd be at, 600 watts, if you don't mind. But we saw Georgia Taylor-Brown up in the saddle early on there on our camera for sections, and we lost 10 riders out the back on the flat and 80 riders pushing 280 watts. And then we hit that first hill, and there was absolute carnage, wasn't there?
Look, it was hard to follow. I was following where all the girls were, and we saw Cassandra right up there early, and it all got blown apart as we got close to that first climb. And you just see those difference in power to weight. You need to be punching out that 5.1, 5.2 watts per kilo. And Ilaria Zane really on the Super League side started to move up around that point. I saw Taylor Spivey. I thought she was moving through and positioning herself for the climb, but she just got caught out, and she's been struggling to really move up since then. But it's been really, really interesting. I must admit, it's tough to follow, but when you start looking at those, that result board, they call it the power play, where you see everyone coming back and forwards. It's interesting to see how the athletes attack this and how they move through, because you get a bad position and that break happens, you're out the door, and it looks like the Super League girls have been caught out a little bit and trying to move through again as that break goes up the road.
Yeah, zwiftpower.com is the website to see all of the leaderboards, and I've got it here right in front of me, so forgive me if I look away from the camera. So 1 kilometre up the hill, Ilaria Zane with 10 seconds back. She was pushing 4.8 watts a kilo. Cassandra Beaugrand was 31 seconds back. in a group with Georgia Taylor-Brown and Leonie Perriot as well, and Taylor Spivey was 41 seconds back. And now we're nearly at the top of the hill. The whole thing has been blown apart, and these are the new gaps. Ilaria Zane has gone from 10 seconds back to 32 seconds. Cassandra's gone from 31 seconds to 123, sorry. Georgia Taylor-Brown's held on a little bit better. She's 113 back. Taylor Spivey is nearly 2 minutes back. And Leonie Perriot, according to my timing sheets, she was 32 seconds back at the bottom of the hill. At the top of the hill, she's 3 minutes 38, which just is testament to exactly how good these Zwift riders are, and tackling these courses over and over and over, and knowing exactly what to do and how the game works in terms of power-ups, etc. I mean, it's a steep learning curve for our Super League athletes, but certainly it's tough out there, mate. It is, isn't it?
Oh, without question. And that type of damage done in a real race on a climb can happen, but we heard the commentators say before it, and this is the gamification, as you said, it's about using that power-up that they have, that gamification, extra energy that, I don't know how you get it. You're a Zwifter, Will. You know how they do it. But some of those athletes used it prior to that first climb to establish that break. Now, that's something you can't do in real life. It's probably something our Super League women didn't know you could do, and they're being caught out. That gap opened up very, very quickly, and no matter how hard you're putting out in power, if you haven't used that free power that they give you, then you're not going to be able to go with that break. And once that break was established, it started to move up the road, and that's how you're seeing those gaps really open up. At a minute behind for Georgia Taylor-Brown, it shows, number one, that she didn't use that power up, and number two, just how strong the women are up front. And now it's about getting on this descent, potentially trying to close that gap, which in this type of racing is almost impossible, and maybe making a move as they get along that flat section and trying to close in again.
Yeah, we'll head back to our commentators at the moment. Ashley Moolman-Passio pushing 5.4 watts a kilo. She's in a group of two with Lou Bates from race 3R, from Shani Berger, who finished fifth in the opening race. Sylvie Bowman's Ella Harris, who we heard was the under-23 women's New Zealand road race champion, and Rachel Elliott, who's in sixth position. She actually had a stroke 2 years ago while she was out. She was riding on Zwift and has come back to be a force in these races. We'll head back to our commentators. We'll keep you updated on where our Super League athletes are, but at the moment it's tough going for the girls in the Super League team.
Ultimately, it is all about the climbs and recovering and being able to go again. So I think a lot of the teams now will be using DSs. They're having chats before. They're making sure their riders know exactly how to race. You can see here, Ash is not pedaling. She's doing 0 watts, and it's giving herself a chance to get the heart rate down so they can really get into a rhythm, work together on this flat section. You can see there's a big group behind of about 7 or 8 riders, and if they work together with a big group like that, they will be able to catch them quickly. So now it's going to be a really interesting ride again to the bottom of this final climb.
And it will also be interesting to see what power-ups these riders have managed to pick up over the top. We won't know until they actually try them out on the next climb. But this group behind starting to close the gap. Elliott, Bermans and Bentley closing. Ella Harris at the head of affairs there. I think they are going to get back in contact. The gap wasn't quite big enough, but a good bit of riding there by Moolman, Passio and Bates. But it is going to come back together. But we're going to have a very, very strong group out in front. If everybody starts to work, the victory in this race could go between one of these riders. But look at Huback. There's 9 riders clear, and it is Louise Huback of Team Hino who is going to have to be forced to chase. But 9 exceptionally good riders here, getting tons and tons of ride-ons. And if you are anywhere near a computer, which I'd imagine you are watching this being streamed, make sure you give these riders a bit of a ride-on. All those little ride-ons drop into the riders' back pockets, which I never actually knew, Danny. That's another bit of Zwift. I learn new things about Zwift every day. I thought somebody had radioactive material in their back pockets, but it's all of the ride-ons, which is great to see.
It really is. I love getting a ride on Zwift, and after I check how many I've got to see how popular I was on that specific ride. But you can see here it's really interesting. Louise Huback, she's going backwards, and this is exactly what I was actually telling Ash Moolman-Passio before they got on the race line tonight, the start line, that if you're in a group, you travel so these 9 riders tonight. They've obviously got the form. They're working well together. You've got Rachel Elliott on the front, driving hard, like we saw her doing in Yorkshire. She was always up there. She doesn't give up all the way to the end. These 9 riders are going to have to fight it out then on the climb the last time. I predict that Ash will go from the bottom. That is her strength. She's going to want to make it super hard for the riders. Louise Huback's being joined now by a couple of riders. This looks actually like quite a big group. So if these riders could get together, they still have a chance to bridge back to that front group.
Yeah, and that's what we have seen in previous races on Zwift. It's getting far more organised. Riders are getting more experience. Teams have got tactics which they stick to. Riders are understanding how it feels to ride in a group, how it feels to ride on your own. And we have seen groups get like 15, 20, 25 seconds and then be brought back again. So the riders out in front cannot afford to be complacent. And if you are watching this spectacle for the very, very first time, riders on the front there, it is like in the real world. There is a draft effect on Zwift. So sitting on the wheel of the rider in front does give you a little bit of an opportunity to relax. So that's why we're seeing these riders swapping turns on the front, just like you would in a real world breakaway. But one thing that there is, that with the slight difference on Zwift, is it's a lot harder to get back on the wheel once you've lost it.
Yeah, it really is. And you can see that group behind now has gone up to 33 seconds. So unfortunately for them, I don't think they're going to get back to this front group. But we know that there's points down to 25th place in this competition. So I said to our riders, our Rowan King team, before we start, don't give up, because we don't know what's going to happen in this front group. If Ash decides to go from the bottom, and like we were chatting about before in terms of going into the red, if riders tried to follow her, they could blow up still with over 5 minutes to go backwards, and a rider that's actually paced themselves properly in the group behind could easily overtake. So I really don't think it's all over until the finish, especially with such a savage finish.
No, it's amazing. If you just back off by maybe 5 or 10 seconds on a climb, the amount of energy that can actually save you. You're going to do a lot less muscle damage, for example, knowing that you can get back on the descent. I think it's quite mature of riders often to let the better climbers go clear on a climb just to save that little bit of energy. And you hardly use any extra energy getting back on a descent. As we look at the figure of Shani Berger from Team Fiat, the Israeli rider, looks like she's a little bit distanced at the moment, but this group, you just see a couple of the riders here now, Danny, using their power-ups, perhaps not particularly happy with the power-ups that they've got, because they will get another opportunity as they go through the start area, and the start area is the Piazza Maggiore. That's where the starting point is. They'll get another opportunity to get a power-up, which they can then hold on to, but riders desperately, I think, will either want the aero one for the flat sprint, or the all-important feather up, and I think that's the one I would certainly want.
I would definitely want that power up of a feather for sure, reducing your weight by 9.5 kilos. But we know Shani Berger's also in great form. She was 5th in Yorkshire, so it's good to see her doing another good ride today. But yeah, like you said, I think it'll be interesting to see if they go flat out from the bottom of this climb in the front group, and riders do start to blow up. The riders behind are almost at that advantage where they've got nothing to lose and they can just time trial their way up and hope to see some riders in the distance, use that as a carrot and be able to chase back, pick riders off. So actually 30 seconds is nothing when you're talking about a 7-minute climb. You can see these riders really are driving forward to try and get that gap as big as possible. Ash Monpasio really is on fire tonight. We're seeing her at the front for the majority of this race, even on the flat sections. It's -1% here, so we know that actually you're better off being behind. Oh, you can see that she's dropped back now. She's probably trying to save herself for this final climb, and like you said, hope to have that feather power up, willing herself to get that, to save it for the steep section when they hit that 18 to 20% part of the climb.
Indeed, well, Pasio happy to do her turn at the front. They're going to be rounding the top part of the circuit, as we can just see that Zwift squirrel in the background there, an enormous blow-up squirrel. Some lovely features here in game. The gamification side of this so important. Of course, there's so many parallels of riding out in the real world, but the Zwift side of things, well, it's all about gamifying it. The heart of Zwift is built in gaming. It's a fitness platform. It's a social platform. It's brought an enormous community together, especially in these very, very difficult times. And Zwift racing is just getting more popular. Riders coming over from different sports. We've got a triathletes team, which we mentioned at the top in this race as well. and riders from the Zwift community, mixing it with some of the finest road riders in the world on this particular course is going to be a very, very exciting proposition as we see Mormon Passio's stats now. As you said, she's dropped back off a little bit, conserving her energy, and she needs to be as fresh as possible if she wants to take her first win on the Zwift platform. But she's doing a good ride so far.
She is, and she knows that there's only about 2 kilometers to go now to the bottom of this climb. Sorry, 5 kilometers to go to the bottom. So she really does need to conserve her energy. You can see Ella Harris, that was your pick at the start of this race, the Zwift Academy winner. She's on top form. Rachel Elliott, she's been up there in most of these Zwift races that we've seen in the last couple of months. So it's going to be fireworks from the bottom, I think. They're still pushing out over 4 watts per kilo, which is absolutely incredible, considering what effort they just had to put in that first climb and the really relatively short recovery that they had on that descent. It was so steep that I'm sure it went so quickly compared to that climb that they'd just done. We see the gap is still holding now to the second group at around the 30-second mark.
Yeah, I think what's happened now that the gap was forged, of course, on the climb, but that big acceleration by Ashley Mormon Passio's. Look at Bentley just at the back of this group. A little bit of sandbagging, but sensible. If you don't need to ride through, you want to sit at the back, that's absolutely fine. And Bermans and Hansen just getting dropped off there. I don't think the pace is electrifying, but they have been dropped. The road just ever so slightly rising here. But I think the lead for our 9 riders out in front, it's kind of ebbing and flowing a little bit. It's kind of settled into a bit of a rhythm now, hasn't it, Danny? I mean, we saw them trying to chase furiously, but I think they're pretty much balancing. There's a power-up has just been used there. A couple of power-ups being dropped before they go back through the arch, and that is the draft power-up that has just been used there. That is the icon of a van just floating above the rider, and that gives a rider the double draft benefit for 30 seconds. And that's a great power-up to use, Danny. If you're struggling in the wheels and you want to give yourself a little bit of a break, it's a great one to drop because it just makes it a little bit easier sat in, doesn't it?
It really is the perfect one to use when you are behind another rider. 30 seconds of draft can really help you in a situation like this where you are about to face a super steep climb and you need all the power and energy that you can get. But I thought it was really interesting earlier. We just saw 2 riders sneak off the back of that, and maybe it was just a loss of focus there, because I actually saw them both having to almost sprint back in the pack. They're both in now. I think it was Cecilia Hansen and Borman actually. So it really is so important and crucial that you stay super focused. I don't think that was a lack of legs. I think it was potentially just a lack of focus, one of them potentially losing the wheel and the other being behind, but they both make that.
The race really starting to heat up now, Macca, and it has strung out hugely. They're back on the flat and just shy of about the 17-kilometre mark, but they finish at the top of the hill once again, and that's going to cause some carnage. Just an update on where our Super League athletes are. I'll just look off screen so I can see on ZwiftPower.com. Ilaria Zane, when I last updated you, she was 40-something seconds back. She's 45 seconds back now and holding 4.3 watts a kilo and averaging about 200 watts. She's doing fantastically, Ilaria Zane. And Leonie Perriot, who was 3 minutes 30 back when I last talked to you, 1 minute 49. So once she got onto that descent and along the flat, she has really put the power down. She is about 600 metres back on Zane at the moment on the flat. And then Cassandra Beaugrand and Georgia Taylor-Brown are both 2 minutes and 1 second back. So they're together a further, let's have a look, 700 metres back. And then Taylor Spivey's 3 minutes 18. So once we hit that downhill, we certainly saw some better power from the Super League women, Macca.
Well, that's where technique comes into play, Will. They were able to use their technical skills on the downhill.
Right.
No, it definitely, as we said, it definitely happened that way. It was, I think there was a few issues with the power there for a second, because I saw Leonie at 3 minutes back and then at 1 minute back. So it's been quite difficult to follow, but very, very interesting. I've been texting with Vincent Louis, who's watching at home. So g'day, Vince. And he's saying he's learning a lot by watching the women. So he said he's going to be on the front the next men's race, but in this one, it's been great. You picked Ilaria Zane. Maybe it's local knowledge. Maybe it's the fact that she is so very, very small and so strong and punching out big power up that climb. She stayed closer than all the other women, and on that descent, she was able to maintain that distance. She had a few women around her, so that drafting and that ability to save your legs on that descent did come into play. But Cassandra Beaugrand and the French girls were right there with Leonie, and I'm quite impressed with how the women are racing. They've done a great job learning as they go, but as we said earlier when we first came on, if you're not attacking and you're not there at the base of the climbs, you get alienated very, very quickly, and it's all chase from that point on. And when you've got so much horsepower up front, it's very, very difficult to close those gaps.
Yeah, very, very steep learning curve, you would have thought. I mean, and we even saw that with these guys. I've only done a couple of races on Zwift before in training, and the race went out super hard. People were pushing 5 or 6 watts a kilogram straight out of the gate. So that the warm up being hugely important. And we had a few technical issues with some of the girls as they were setting up. So maybe just missed the start just a little bit. And again, that's part of the learning curve, and we'll see them improve again in the next race. And then just making sure that you stay in those groups, because as soon as you get dropped, and we saw it just blow apart completely on the first trip up, I think it's called the Madonna climb, from my memory from the Giro. It just absolutely blew apart, and then it was impossible to get back. So if you're all alone out there, it's a very, very tough ride, and it's going to be, again, as they now move up towards the 20-kilometre mark, we've got one more climb up the Bologna climb, and that's going to hurt, isn't it?
Oh, without question. And interesting, you're seeing the women that do this a lot. We're listening to the commentary, in particular, this Ella Harris from New Zealand, who's been racing all these Zwift races, and she's never really dropped outside that top 5 or 6. If you watch those front girls, they're really staying in that front group. So even when they fall back very, very quickly because the power's coming down, you don't feel it while you're racing these online events. You don't feel that draft. They quickly adjust that power and move straight back up into that front group. So there's definitely something in staying in that front, 10 women at all times during the race, especially when you know what's coming up ahead. So for our women racing, knowing the course is critical, knowing what's coming up. It's not so much what turns are coming up, but more so the gradient that's coming up and positioning yourself correctly for that, because as we've seen, our women got really, really isolated very quickly at the base of that climb, and Ilaria Zane, who had put herself closest to the front, has been able to maintain that closeness to that front group because of that.
Yeah, just as you speak now, I'll give you a last update. Ilaria Zane, I think I had her at 45 or 47 seconds back. She's now 38 seconds back and has moved up into 25th position.
Wow.
So she's positioning herself ahead of this final climb. Leonie Perriot's in 39th position, 147 back. And then Georgia Taylor-Brown and Cassandra Beaugrand, both 211 back, with Taylor Spivey in 72nd place at 327. And now they've updated again. Ilaria Zane, 33 seconds back and in 20th position. So we'll keep you updated on where Ilaria Zane is at the moment. But at 46 kilos, Ilaria Zane, she's putting down huge wattage. We'll go back to our commentators. We'll come back to you halfway through this climb.
But back to some privacy there for Duncan, who's looking very, very good. Just making sure he's at the front of this group, because once you hit that hairpin, the gradient really does kick in, doesn't it? I mean, if you even in a group of 9, it's best to be maybe in about 2nd or 3rd position. You don't want to get gapped at the bottom of this climb and have to close a gap early on.
Definitely not. And Lizzie looked so composed there, didn't she? She really didn't have a game face on. She was smiling. So it'll be interesting to see how much power she's got left in those legs as we hit the bottom of this climb. But absolutely not. You don't want to be in 7th, 8th, 9th position. It is a small group, but even on the severity of this climb, you really need to be at the front. So I'd say, like you just did there, Matt, 2nd, 3rd, 4th even position would be the optimal position to be on a climb like this. That means you can really react to any moves that are made. If you're 9 wheels back, that's a long way to have to close any kind of attacks. It could be a cat and mouse. We might see a cat and mouse type race where it slows and then we have these really high bursts of power. But I personally think a rider like Ash has to, like we said before, go from the bottom and almost ride it like a time trial as hard as she can for the 2 kilometers.
I do think you're right. I think that's the way. I mean, when you look at the composition of this group, when you look at the strengths and the weaknesses of all the riders, there's a bit of a mix here. They're all obviously exceptional climbers because they had to survive that pace that was set by Ashley Moorman-Passio on the first descent. All of them can climb very well. But I think the crucial thing and the interesting thing about this particular climb is the fact that the last 300 or 400 meters are relatively flat. So if you're a climber and haven't got a sprint, you've got to do the damage early. Here is the chasing pack. It's actually come down now 28 seconds as we look at a group of about 25 riders or so chasing behind. I still think there's not enough tarmac for them to get back in contact. Although if one rider from the front group, one or two riders do capitulate, they could soon be caught because the gradient's so steep. If you do blow, if you do put yourself into the red, Danny, you can lose lots and lots of time in those last couple of Ks.
Absolutely. And I do actually think that might happen. It looks like some groups have emerged here, which means they will be traveling faster as a unit. Like you said, it's come down now to 27 seconds. And again, over this severity of the climb, I do think if riders are dropped from that front group, then they could be caught. I don't think the winner will be caught from a rider in this chasing pack, but it is possible for some of these riders in the chasing pack to still come away with a top 10 position.
Yeah, well, Whitelaw moves to the front now. A very, very consistent rider as well from Team Hino moving to the front. But again, she's got a rider in the front. As you look at this, the riders are spreading across the road here, still at around 4 watts a kilogram. It's not long before they'll turn that very, very harsh right. And then the road really does rear its head, really does pitch up. Moolman Passio getting back into that position. She knows where she's on the road. There is the hairpin. We're on the foot of the climb that will take us to the top of the Madonna di San Luca. We have 2 kilometers to go, Danny. This is the final climb. Who will emerge supreme? Berger now goes to the front.
This is where it's going to be won or lost. And we saw that group behind it actually came down to 19 seconds. Lea Thorstein in 10th place. So these riders really have to go for it now. But you can see Ashley Moolman Passio's coming to the front. She's producing nearly 6 watts per kilo. We know that is a hell of a lot of power. So she's doing what we said she would do. Louise Bates in top form. Rachel Elliott is still there. They're all going to fight all the way to the top of this climb. Ashley Moolman Passio is setting the pace here. 12% gradient. Are they going to use their power-ups? We know that the feather power-up on this climb is going to be optimal. And we know when riders are using that, they're either suffering if they're further back in the group, or they want to burst even further ahead if they're at the start, if they're at the front.
Indeed. I mean, it's especially on a finish like this, you could argue you could use the featherweight power up at the end, but you don't really want to use it on the last 400 meters. It'll give you a little bit of a benefit, but because the gradient is so relatively moderate, that's not the place to use it. But that's the big quandary, isn't it? Do you use it earlier on just to reduce the amount of suffering because of the pressure being put at the front, or do you save it to accelerate a little bit later? That's the wonderful element of the gamification side of Zwift. It is very, very well. It's down to your own choosing. It's down to race tactics. But this group's still together. Everybody riding very, very strongly. Berger at the back there, going into the red there. 8.6 watts a kilo just to stay in contact. But Moolman Passio still ticking over at 5 or 6 watts a kilogram. She needs to keep this pace high because that's what suits her. She cannot afford for the others to start dictating.
She has to, and you can see Cecilia Hansen and Bentley are just coming off this group now, 1 second behind, which doesn't seem a lot, but to close these gaps all the time is going to be taking so much effort. And we know if they had top form, if they were feeling good, they'd be up there in the top 5 of these riders. So we know this is going to really start to hurt, and it is such a mental game, like we saw in the first time up this course. We can see Borman's now coming to the front. She's obviously feeling good. She did get distance slightly on the flat section, but she's obviously got good legs tonight. And I think this is a slightly less steep part of the climb at 8%. And when it ramps up to 20%, you're going to see the riders having to make moves if they don't want to be sprinting in that flat section at the finish.
Indeed. Well, Berger in the centre, you can just see the power up from Team Fear being used. But she just lost the wheel, and I think that's she won't get another power up now, but maybe that's going to help her just a little bit. You could see her avatar just moving up that group very, very quickly. And because of these riders, most of the riders in this front group are going to be around between 50 and 60, maybe 62 kilograms. So losing 9 kilograms makes a massive difference on this sort of gradient. But it's Rachel Elliott on the front, 6 watts a kilo. We're just going underneath the archway. Then we have this little series of switchback, a little S-bend, and then we have the most savage, the most brutal part of this climb still to come. But great riding by Elliott here as Moolman Passio, the multiple time trial champion and road champion of South Africa, second in the Women's Giro d'Italia in 2018, moving to the front, and the group now starting to fracture.
This is where she has to make her move, and we are seeing 8 watts per kilo. This is do or die for Ash. It's 16%, and this is where she has to go as hard as she can. Nearly 400 watts here, 397 watts, which for a rider of under 50 kilos is just extraordinary. She has to commit. She cannot afford to now go back to that threshold power, the state that she's comfortable in. She has to go for it. She's distancing Louise Bates here, and this really is something else.
This is an absolutely incredible. But look at the stats at the top there. This is they're on the steepest part of the climb as the group behind containing Huback. There's a couple of riders getting dropped from that front group. Duncan at 7 seconds, Hansen at 8, and the group closing behind. So the minor place is still up for grabs, but look at this side-on shot. There's the Liv bike, there's the Rowan King kit, there's the South African flag, and this is Ashley Moore-Limpassio. She's moving clear of Louise Bates, who still is holding on for grim death. She's holding on as tightly as she can, 1 second. But this is where Moore-Limpassio needs to open up a little bit of a gap, because we only have around 100 metres of steep gradient before it flattens to the finish.
We haven't seen either of these riders using their feather power-ups yet, so I'm not sure if they're saving it or if they just don't have the power-up to use. And Louise Bates, we know that she knows exactly how to ride on Zwift, and that's what I love, the gamification of this program. She knows how to race. It will be really interesting to see if Ash doesn't put any more time into Louise Bates. She knows exactly when she has to go on this climb. She would have ridden this course before, but Ash is still powering on now. She's putting 4 seconds into Louise Bates as it is flattening off 7% here. So Ash has just got to now time trial her way into this last 500 meters of the course.
Well, this is a wonderful performance by Ashley Moore-Limpassio. She's a guest for the Rowan King team. But Louise Bates is not giving up from Team R3R, third last week in Yorkshire. She likes an attritional race. But Moore-Limpassio, she must not look back. 420 metres to go for the South African. She's great on the climbs, but she's a TT champion of South Africa. She knows about the solo effort, but she needs to keep pressing on. And still, none of these riders, Danny, are using the power-ups. This is a thrilling finale. 4 seconds. Bates is closing the gap.
This is absolutely incredible. They must have a power up to use. They must be saving it to the finish. Louise Bates is closing the gap, and it's whether Ash can sprint in these last 200 meters to the line. Has she got a power up, or is she going to have to rely purely on her leg power for these last 200 meters?
Well, 200 metres to go to the top of the Madonna di San Luca. This is the Trofeo of Bologna, the third in the Zwift Classics. And Ashley Moore-Limpassio, it looks as if she's going to take a memorable victory. Her first on Zwift. 10 seconds is the gap to Louise Bates from Team R3R now. It looks as if it's going to be a victory for Ashley Moore-Limpassio. She takes the win here in the Trofeo Bologna for the Rowan King team. What a dominant performance by the South African. Great ride by Louise Bates. Around 14 seconds adrift, coming home for second place. And it is Sylvie Bormans is in third place there for Team AHDR Purple Armada. But no doubt about the winner. What a performance by the South African.
Wow, that was absolutely incredible. And I am obviously personally very delighted that she's crossed the line first in our Rowan King kit. That's super, super special for us. But what an outstanding performance. She knew when she was going to go. She had a race plan. She would have spoken to the team DS beforehand, and she knew what she had to do to win that race there. She's been training on Zwift for the last few weeks, so she's really learnt the game. But that was just incredible. She managed to distance Louise Bates with about 200 meters to go. I think Louise realised that she wasn't quite going to get back to Ash there. But wow, what an incredible race that was. You can see now the riders that are just coming to the final, they're really spaced out all over the road, and this really is a grim slog now for everyone to finish.
Indeed. Well, this is the picture of Elena Cecchini of Canyon SRAM. She is a former Italian road race champion. As she finishes inside the top 10, she'll be pretty happy with that performance, but comes across the line at just over a minute. As we look at Coston, as you said, Danny, this field split to bits, but we expected that to happen on this course. An exceptionally hard course, but it's been a great race as well. The pressure applied early on the first descent of the climb to the Madonna di San Luca by Ashley Moore-Limpassio and Bates. That elite group of 9 riders rolling through to the finish. But again, she applied the pressure at exactly the right time. And there is confirmation of the results. The winner of the Trofeo Bologna is Ashley Moulin-Passio for the Rowan King team. And 14 seconds adrift in the end, it was Louise Bates from R3R. And Ella Harris, we thought she'd be up there. Great performance by the young New Zealander, running for Canyon SRAM in third, but 35 seconds adrift. And look at that. KISS Racing Team's Rachel Elliott in fourth. Superb performance by her. Sylvie Bermans in fifth. Then we have Cecilia Hansen from Arno in sixth. Then we have Bentley Duncanberger and Elena Cecchini rounding out the top 10. What an absolutely wonderful race. But look at the damage that has been done. The top 10 there spread over just over a minute. But look at the real class of riders in the mix there too, Danny.
Absolutely, and that was a fantastic performance for all of these riders in the top 10. And like we said, they actually didn't get caught. That front group of 9 did manage to stay away to the finish, so they all rode that fantastically well. And we saw Elena Cecchini just rounding off the top 10. She knows how to race. But that was a fantastic performance by everyone on such a savage course. You know, I keep saying it time and time again, but you need to go out there and try it. You'll be able to have access to that course now on Zwift, so go and give it a go yourself. It really, really is tough. These riders make it look so much easier than it is. But you can just see here, this is Louise Bates coming in to finish with Ash. And it was just, I loved how they all really took it on. They really got involved. They really race aggressively. And these women are making these races look so aggressive time and time again. And I just love it. I think it's an absolute privilege to be able to get these races live streamed. I love commentating on them. I get super excited. So another fantastic race there.
Even more excited as well. You did remain relatively impassive there. You remained the consummate professional as ever, Danny. But no, great to get Ashley Moorman across riding on Zwift, racing on Zwift. I certainly don't think it will be the last time, but great for your team as well, Rowan King. Wonderful to see. But it was a great race. And the racing, I say each time, I think, as we just look at the replay of this breakaway that formed after the first ascent of the climb, but I say it every time, and it's the truth, the racing is getting better and better. With each race, riders learn about the gamification, the nuances of riding on Zwift, especially riders who haven't had too much experience of riding Zwift. They're adapting very, very quickly. And as a result, these races are getting faster, they're getting more exciting, and as a proposition to watch, they're incredibly enjoyable and a pleasure to commentate on.
Absolutely. Like we heard from Louise Huback earlier, they are taking this so seriously. It's super professional. All these riders are racing and training together. They're having meetings before the race to work out how they're going to ride this tactically, and it's brilliant. They have to warm up properly, and I think the professional riders who are actually having a shock in these Zwift races are really starting to take these seriously now, and as we're seeing some fantastic racing.
Indeed. Well, a real mix of professional riders from the real world coming onto Zwift and bossing it today. Harris and Moulin-Passio and Cecchini there, 2 riders from Canyon SRAM. I think this is one of those courses that definitely suits riders from the road, but a great race. And of course, as you just said, Danny, if you want to race on this particular course, just head on to Zwift.com/classics and you can select a race of the choice depending on the standard of rider, depending on your ability. You can race on this course for the next few days. It is a very, very cool course to race on. And on social media as well, follow the hashtag Zwift Classics. Now, we do have some more action for you because on Friday, it's the men that race, Friday the 17th of April. It's a men's team points race, which is round the Richmond course. Of course, the World Championships back there in 2015. It's called the Richmond Challenge. Join me at 7 p.m. British summertime on Zwift's Facebook and YouTube for some more Zwift Classics action. But for now, from the top of the Madonna di San Luca, from me and from Danny Rowe, it's goodbye and stay safe.
Ciao, stay safe. Thanks, Matt.
Very back end of it too. Outstanding work from Ashley Moulin-Passio, who finished in a 41.49 and finished at an average of 5 watts a kilogram. It was horrible to watch from where we were sitting. Macca, how did you see that one play out?
Yeah, it was tough to follow, tough to watch. But as we saw in the early setup, it was all going to happen on that last climb. And Laria Zane was at 19 seconds back at the base of that climb. They were talking about that feather power up, which was very, very interesting for me. As a non-Zwifter, as I keep saying, as someone who's just trying to understand the gamification of cycling, it was interesting to see how they're using those feather power-ups. And I think our women got caught out with not using them at the right times. And it was actually more exciting than I anticipated. I actually enjoyed that thoroughly.
Well, if it can get you excited at 4 o'clock in the morning, it must be pretty good. I think Georgia Taylor-Brown, I don't know if we've got her just yet. She's just toweling down. I can see her in her, it literally looks like a cellar underneath her house. We'll see if we can get her. Georgia, can you hear me right now? No, she's still talking off screen. We'll try and get her in just a second. But just an update on
Georgia in particular was one Georgia in particular was one we were following. When you looked at the way the Super League women were travelling, it was you could really see the athletes that were really, really starting to struggle. Lea Thorstein was right there. She started to fall apart at the last part of that climb. But Leonie Perriot and Cassandra Beaugrand were just consistent all day. Leonie was sort of looking at jumping away and trying to close that gap. Then she'd come back to Cassandra, and Cassandra just stayed even tempo. But it was Georgia and Taylor that really struggled on the steep part of that last climb, and you saw that quite a lot. Taylor didn't have a heart rate monitor on, so it was hard to monitor that heart rate against that power she was pushing out.
Yeah, I'm just watching her off screen right now. She just finished across the line. That is Taylor Spivey. She's on the phone immediately. She looks like she's in a nicer room at least than Georgia Taylor-Brown is, but it was a very, very tough time for her. So just to update you on where our women finished, Lea Thorstein, the best of our Super League athletes. She, as you said, was 20 seconds back at the bottom of the climb, finished 2 minutes and 5 seconds back. It was very, very tough pace at the front with Moolman Passio and Cecilia Hansen and Shani Berger there pushing 7 watts a kilo at times up that hill at the end. So they really know how to race this kind of races. She was 2:05 back with Leonie Perriot in 40th position. So Leonie, tough on that first climb. The start got away from her a bit, but then she came back in the second half of that race in a big way. She still finished 3:36 back. Cassandra Beaugrand 3:53 back in 47th position. She averaged 4.4 watts a kilo. Perriot averaged 4.5 watts a kilo. She was the strongest across in terms of her watts a kilo of the Super League athletes. Georgia Taylor-Brown there, we just saw 65th in the end. And then Taylor Spivey coming across the line in 83rd position, 8 minutes back. So that is certainly a learning curve for our athletes. I think Taylor, I'm not sure if she can hear us as well at the moment. And there's Georgia as well, who's just getting hydrated. We'll try again to see if Georgia can hear us. Hi, Georgia. How was that?
You can hear us.
I mean, I kind of enjoyed it, but it was awful. It was just so hard from the start. And I committed from the start, and then I completely blew. And then I thought, okay, I'll try and recover on the descent and then go on the hill again. And the hill was even worse the second time round. I thought I'd get into a rhythm, but I really didn't.
Oh, at least you're being honest about it. We noticed for all the Super League girls that it was a tough start. So the pace was right on. We knew that was going to happen because we've spoken to you about this before, but was it even hotter that pace early on than you imagined?
Yeah, it was okay. Like, it was a pace that I could have stayed at, but I don't know, it's hard on Zwift because you put in an effort and then you slowly surge to the front and then you think that you're going too fast and then you end up at the back. So yeah, I think it is all about tactics, and I had my boyfriend at the side of me saying, okay, go now, don't go any faster, stay there, okay, don't let yourself get to the back. And you find yourself in these positions and you're like, no, but I mean, I enjoyed it, and I would definitely do another one because I think I learned a lot from that first one, and hopefully I'll take more into the next race that I do.
Yeah, it looked like the race went up the road on the first climb. You said that earlier. Was that a positioning thing, or was it a power thing? Did you feel that you couldn't go with that break, or did you just miss the break as it went up the road?
I think it's definitely positioning. I think you kind of need to get to the front just before the climb. Otherwise, you're so far back. But I mean, I think going up the climb, I was doing similar watts per kilo to the other girls. So yeah. It is all about positioning. And yeah, I just didn't position very well, and also my legs were just done.
Is it something though? I mean, you said it was very tough, but you enjoyed it. I mean, in this time of isolation that we're all living in, the Super League's trying to keep racing coming to everybody. Is it something that you could incorporate into your training, or that really pushes you a bit harder than your general training while we're all waiting to get back out on the road once again?
Yeah, it definitely gives you a little bit of a focus. And like today, I was just sat around chilling out, and it felt weird because it felt like a proper race was coming up, and I did try to treat it like a proper race, and I prepared beforehand, and I had my gel about 10 minutes before, so I did all the right things. And I think it's just nice to be able to feel like you're in a little bit of a race and got something to focus on, rather than think, oh, I've got 3 hours to go on the kicker now, and just pedaling away. It's nice to be able to get a bit of an effort in, and yeah, just get in that race environment again, because I do really miss it.
Were you aware of the other Super League women and where they were in the race, or you just focused on where your positioning was? Was there a little bit of competitiveness amongst your peers, your Super League peers, or it was just head down trying to move through and stay as close to the front as possible?
No, I knew where Leonie was and where Kassan was, because I saw Leonie was just in front going up the first climb, and I was like, okay, try and get back on, and I just couldn't. And then I was with Kassan for the rest of it, and then we caught Leonie again going into the final climb, and then those two just paddled away from me into the clouds.
Well, from where we were sitting, you're certainly doing incredibly well. Congratulations on finishing 65th overall. It's been tough going for all the Super League athletes, men and women. We hope to see you in another Super League race again. We hope that you find your way out of the cellar and just relax for a little while.
Yeah, in the man cave down here, as it says on the wall.
Well, Taylor right now is in a what looks like a lovely hotel room in Portugal, and whereas you're at home in the UK in your cellar. So who wins and who loses there, you can decide. But thank you so much for your time and for being part of the first Women's Super League esports race.
Thanks very much, guys. Bye.
All right, go and rest
Cheers,
up.
Jojo.
We'll cross right now to Taylor Spivey, and there she is, just warming down. Taylor, talk us through it. How did you feel during your first Zwift race? She got us there. I don't know if you can hear us. Taylor, can you hear us there in Portugal?
She can.
No, we've lost her just at the moment.
Much nicer pain cave, as you said, Will. A much nicer pain cave than GGB's.
So much nicer.
It's yeah.
It's so to say that George's pain cave looks like it's from a horror movie.
Yeah. Well, it's a
Taylor,
pain cave.
hello.
This is like a 5-star resort.
Can we hear Taylor? Taylor can hear us, I think. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Can you say something? No. Okay.
So
well,
if you move your mouth, I can talk for you. It was very hard out there. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, it was absolutely brutal. I hated it. I'm never doing it again.
Yes, and yeah, remind me not to enter when you guys reach out, because I don't want to.
Exactly.
It's terrible.
Vincent didn't tell me it was going to be like this. That I think that's what she's actually. But we've got audio issues. But Taylor, look, hold your fingers up quickly. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard was it? Don't talk. Just give me your fingers out of 10 like this.
Don't talk.
Yeah, 10. I thought so. A 9 or a 10. All right.
That's a 10.
That's a 9. All right. We can't get the audio from you, Taylor, but thank you so much for joining us in our first race. We hope everyone out there enjoyed it. Macca, I'll say goodbye to you as well. Time to go back to bed, mate. It's 5:07 a.m. here, so well done.
Thanks, Will. See you.
All right, there we go. We'll wrap it up right now. We hope you enjoyed tuning in on Facebook or YouTube on the Super League Triathlon various social media channels. Please get involved more. Send us some more questions. Send us some info that you would like to see. We have a race every 4 days over the next couple of weeks, so make sure you tune in. Do not miss. All of the racing that's going on in triathlon right now is coming to you via these streams, and we'll see you soon.